Hi, it's Katrina. Fire under Antarctica. 85,000 earthquakes recently shook Antarctica during the strongest seismic outburst ever recorded on the continent. These minor earthquakes were likely triggered by a newly uncovered underwater volcano. The volcano has been dormant for a very long time, but woke up in late summer 2020. With its awakening, the tremors started. The swarm of earthquakes continued for nearly 2 years. Researchers believe they were likely caused by hot magma that leaked out of the volcano and seared its way into the Earth's crust. Seismologist Simone Seska said similar things have been witnessed at other places on the planet, but never before in Antarctica. Simone went on to say that normally such a thing would happen over a long geological timescale. We're talking way longer than the human lifespan. But here, there were tens of thousands of minor tremors in just 2 years, and all because of magma leaking underneath the surface of the ocean. The earthquakes occurred all around the Orca Seamount, which is the name of the previously inactive volcano. Its peak rises roughly 3,000 feet from the sea floor near the northwestern tip of Antarctica. Beneath the water here, the Phoenix tectonic plate is slowly digging underneath the Antarctic plate, creating open rifts, potential valleys of magma, and physically stretching parts of the crust. While we don't seem to be in any danger now, that could all change in the future, and rather unexpectedly. The mystery structure in space. Experts have identified what they are calling a large-scale structure somewhere behind the Milky Way. Scientists working at Argentina's National University of San Juan were behind the discovery. Although, just to be clear, they don't believe it's a gigantic artificial object like an intergalactic spaceship. Instead, it's a newly discovered galaxy cluster. Even more mysterious is the fact that astronomers detected the structure in an uncharted region of space. This is far beyond the center of the Milky Way in a phantom region called the Zone of Avoidance. It's a dark spot on our universal map with roughly 20% of the night sky in it. The reason scientists have had such a hard time scanning the zone is that there is a gigantic bulge in the center of our galaxy, making it challenging to see. It's also quite difficult to look through the cosmic fog of the universe at objects billions of light years away. Yet despite these difficulties, the scientists were able to use all the latest technology to identify the structure. They used infrared radiation to see a massive cluster of galaxies roughly 3 billion light-years from us. The galaxies are drawn together by a monstrous center of gravity, little more than pinpricks of light at the edge of a telescope. Pyramid of the Unknown Queen. Archaeologists in Egypt just made the discovery of the year. In the Saqqara necropolis, about 20 miles from Giza, they unearthed the pyramid of an unknown ancient queen. They also found a small stash of coffins, new mummies, a horde of artifacts, and a series of dark underground tunnels. They believe the coffins and mummies belonged to the generals and advisors of King Tut before the boy pharaoh's death in 1323 BC. Their excavations were focused near the Pyramid of Teti, the first king of the 6th dynasty. During the New Kingdom, between the 6th century BC to the 11th century BC, Teti was worshipped as a god, and for this reason, people wanted to be buried near his pyramid. Researchers uncovered the shaft where hundreds upon hundreds of sarcophagi had been buried just so the dead could be within close proximity to Teti. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass says he and his team uncovered 300 beautiful coffins over the past 2 years, each one totally unique. The coffins each have individual faces painted on the exterior of their sarcophagus, and each sarcophagus is decorated with scenes from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Then there's the Pyramid of the Unknown Queen. Researchers uncovered fragments of the pyramid, relatively small by Egyptian standards, but don't know who it was made for. They believe the queen's name was Neith, and yet she appears in no historical records. This discovery could change history. Big shout out to Jeff Forrams and Marius Jacobus Van Zyl. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. We'd love to have you. The origin of flowers. Flowers have not been around forever. Up until now, flowers were believed to have evolved only 130 million years ago, not long before the end of the dinosaurs. This was because no fossil evidence was ever found of older flowers. By flowers, I mean any flowering plant. This was not a thing that existed throughout the entire life of our planet, at least not until about 174 million years ago. Scientists have just discovered a new fossilized flower that pushes the birth of these plants back a whopping 50 million years. A team of researchers in China studied 264 specimens of flower fossils preserved in rock slabs discovered at the South Jiangshan Formation. One of the flowers, named Nanjinganthus dendrostela, was found to be significantly older than any other. Researchers believe this may have been the flower that gave rise to all later species of flowers. Or it may have been a failed flowering plant that hit an evolutionary dead end and went extinct. Either way, this has been a major discovery for both botanists and scientists all over the world. The oldest sign of life. Researchers believe they may have just discovered some of the earliest life on the planet layered in rocks in Western Australia. This life comes in the form of fossils, but not fossils of dinosaurs, prehistoric monsters, or early sea creatures. Instead, the fossils are called stromatolites, made by the excretions of photosynthetic microbes. These excretions are left over in layers of rock from 3.43 billion years ago. Even older ones have been found in Australia's Dresser Formation from 3.48 billion years ago. The issue with these fossils has always been that after billions of years, all traces of organic matter have vanished. All we have left are the layers in the rock. There's never been a concrete way to say if the fossils were left behind by real microbes or some unknown geological process. But according to Kieran Hickman-Lewis with the Natural History Museum in London, the stromatolites are definitely the result of biological processes. Putting aside all the scientific mumbo-jumbo, what we have here is confirmed proof of photosynthesis billions of years before the first complex life forms. Researchers believe the microbes likely formed in shallow lagoons that were fed by hydrothermal vents in the ocean. The mixture of heat and water led to an almost magical inception of life, which then used photosynthesis to grow. The excretion of these microscopic organisms is what we see in the fossil record. In simpler terms, it's plant poop, a forgotten extinction. Scientists have just discovered evidence that points to a previously unknown mass extinction event in our planet's ancient past. It happened about 550 million years ago, making it the first known massive extinction. It was at the height of what scientists call the Ediacaran period, when life in the oceans was just beginning to flourish. Tiny creatures called petalonamids, shaped like aquatic feathers, sucked nutrients from the water, and the first ancestors of jellyfish were just starting to evolve. Then, without any warning, 80% of all life vanished, and not a single trace was left behind in the fossil record. Researchers from Virginia Tech recently identified a dramatic decline in global oxygen levels that likely led to the first mass extinction event. It may very well have been the first climate change catastrophe that led to an unbelievable loss of life. Scientists reached this conclusion by looking at animals that lived before 550 million years ago and animals that were still around 10 million years later. They were shocked to see that the only animals still surviving were ones better suited to low oxygen conditions. This observation led to the deduction that something mysterious happened, crashing oxygen levels and essentially suffocating 80% of life to death. Any creature that couldn't cope with low oxygen was efficiently removed from the ecosystem. Byzantine Business District. Archaeologists in Turkey recently made a sensational find in the ancient Greek city of Ephesus. This city is something of a mystery because it was destroyed unexpectedly around 614 AD. In the ruins of this forgotten city, researchers uncovered a shockingly well-preserved Byzantine business district. Scientists with the Austrian Academy of Sciences uncovered household items preserved in rooms underneath a thick layer of burned material. They also found hundreds of copper coins, preserved salted mackerels, scraps of ceramic, and bowls with the remains of meals in them. This was all in Domitian Square, what was once a prominent location near the political center of the city in Roman times. Archaeologists also found shops, workshops, and other preserved structures from late antiquity. This was after the Roman imperial period, following the destruction of Ephesus in 263 AD by the Goths. After the Goths left and Rome had lost its power, the original city center, which had been a huge and luxurious square, was built over with shops and turned into a business district. Then, in 614 AD, the city was utterly destroyed by an earthquake. Super-Earth. Scientists have just discovered an unbelievable planet. Astronomers identified planet TOI 1075 using the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS. It appears to be one of the most massive super-Earths ever. The planet is a shocking 10 times larger than Earth. It orbits a tiny star roughly 200 light-years away from us, and it rotates around that star once every 14.5 hours. Instead of 365 days in a year, this gigantic planet only has 14.5 hours, less hours than our average day. Because its orbit is so brief, the planet is ridiculously hot. It may be huge, but it's sitting at an estimated daily temperature of 1,922 degrees Fahrenheit. The term super-Earth is given to any planet that's at least twice as large as our own. We don't have any in our own solar system, but they are common throughout the galaxy. Most of them are rocky planets just like Earth, hiding in the habitable zone of their star and potentially crawling with life. It's doubtful anything's alive on the planet. Its surface is almost certainly molten lava, but many other super-Earths could have life on them. Fun fact, in the case of TOI 1075, it is so big there is significantly more gravity on its surface, making you about 3 times heavier than you are right now. The oldest written sentence. Scientists recently identified an ancient inscription. This inscription appears to be the oldest sentence ever written in the first alphabet ever created. It's a monumental discovery in human linguistics, and it's also incredibly strange. Let's start at the beginning. The inscription was uncovered on an ancient ivory comb. It was found at the site of Tel Lachish, an ancient Canaanite city in central Israel. While archaeologists were inspecting the comb, they found 17 small letters. Together, the markings form 7 words which translate to, "May this tusk root out the lice of the hair of the beard." In other words, let this comb get rid of your disgusting beard lice. We now have the oldest inscribed sentence put together using Canaanite script, which relied on the Phoenician alphabet and which used the same characters that would eventually morph into the English alphabet. For that matter, these ancient characters would become the foundation for Arabic, Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and Russian. Keep in mind that the foundation for modern Chinese writing goes back much further to about 5,000 years ago. But it's not considered the same because these symbols don't create phonetics in the same way. As exciting of a discovery as this is, it's still weird. The ancient preserved sentence is a few lines talking about beard lice. The missing link. The Hylobatids family of apes includes roughly 20 living species of gibbons found throughout tropical Asia. Fossils from these types of ancient apes are exceptionally rare, with not too many being found. Most ancient gibbon specimens come in the form of teeth and jaw bones uncovered in caves throughout China and Southeast Asia. The oldest go back about 2 million years. But according to Professor of Anthropology Terry Harrison with New York University, a much older fossil has just been found, dating back about 7 million years. The fossil was found in the Yunnan province of China. It belongs to a tiny ancient ape named something like Yuanmopithecus xiaoyuan. What's interesting is that it doesn't appear to have been very different from modern gibbons. It was about the same size, same weight, and was only slightly more primitive. You might be wondering what all this has to do with the missing link. Genetic studies have shown that the Hylobatids family of apes diverged from one common lineage about 17 million years ago. This was at the same time that the same lineage split into other branches, with one branch leading to great apes and the other branch leading to human beings. But there is still an incredibly important gap of 10 million years. That's the time between our split from the common animal that links us to great apes and gibbons. Those 10 million years are critical in understanding how we evolved separately from apes. and yet the fossil record is still totally dry. Our missing link is still missing. What we do see from this newly discovered gibbons fossil is that not much changed over 7 million years. That means not much likely changed for humans over the same period. But without the missing link, we still don't have a clear picture of our distant past. The land of Lamos. In Greek mythology, there was a tribe of giants called the Laestrygonians, and they lived in a land called Lamos. There are several different sources for the history of the giants, but the most famous is Homer's epic Odyssey. According to Homer, the land of Lamos was in the far north, so close to the top of the world that the dawn came almost immediately after the sunset. Greek myth said the Laestrygonians were descendants of Poseidon and Gaia, Mother Earth herself. They were some of the first beings, giants who roamed the earth before the dawn of ordinary-sized men and women. Although Homer said that the land of Lamos was located in the north, most historians agree the mythology places it on either the island of Sardinia or Sicily. Historian Angelo Paratico believes the stories of the giants spawned from Greek sailors coming across the giants of Monte Prama in Sardinia. These are mysterious statues left behind by the Nuragic civilization, depicting humongous stone men. On the other hand, some historians believe the tales of the Laestrygonians and even the Cyclopes came from the belief that the giants once inhabited Sicily. No matter where the inspiration came from, it's clear the Greeks thought there were giants living somewhere on the planet. The Greeks firmly believed in a land of giants, and they weren't the only ones. There may have really been a race of supersized humans living in Europe thousands of years ago. We just haven't found enough proof of them yet. Pi-Ramesses. Pi-Ramesses is a mythical city spoken of in the Bible. According to the book of Exodus, the city was built on the backs of Israelite slaves. At one point in time, Pi-Ramesses was considered to be the greatest city Egypt had ever seen. The ancient city is also associated with the biblical pharaoh from Exodus, whom many scholars claim was King Ramesses II. In Exodus, the Bible says that when the Israelites left Egypt, there were 600,000 of them on foot. When the Israelites left Pi-Ramesses, its residents were too concerned with the sudden deaths of their firstborns to care about the fleeing slaves. If you remember the devastating plagues from the Bible, God sent horrible curses down upon the Egyptians, with the final one killing every firstborn in the entire city. But according to modern historians and archaeologists, Pi-Ramesses was a real city, and none of the events in the book of Exodus ever happened. The first flaw in the biblical story based on real physical evidence is that there wasn't any slave labor used in ancient Egypt. The city of Pi-Ramesses, along with the greatest monuments the Egyptians ever built, were all constructed by skilled laborers, not Israelite slaves. Also, King Ramesses II left one of the most detailed records of his kingship of any Egyptian monarch to date. Not in any of the records does it so much as mention the Israelites. The reality is that Pi-Ramesses was a great capital city built by Ramesses II between 1279 and 1213 BC. From its position in the eastern delta, it became the greatest city of its day, rivaling Thebes in the south. All the myths about the city stem from biblical tales that never took place. Atlantis of the Sands. Arabia has its own legend of a lost city called Iram of the Pillars, or Atlantis of the Sands. This place is just as famous in Arabia as Atlantis is everywhere else. The legend of the city starts in the Quran, and shockingly, it has some parallels to Plato's story of Atlantis. The city of Iram was said to be extremely advanced, and it was populated by people called Ad. The city's inhabitants built towering skyscrapers and great monuments, and they became so advanced and powerful that they turned their backs on Allah. The prophet Hud was sent to the people of Iram to convince them to stop their blasphemy. When they refused, the Ad were severely punished. Just like how Atlantis was swept into the sea by angry Poseidon, and how Sodom was destroyed with fire by God, Iram was swallowed in a sandstorm and obliterated. Interestingly, the legend may partially be true. In the 1990s, archaeologist Nicholas Clapp uncovered the lost city of Ubar buried under the desert sands in Arabia. Nicholas found the lost city by using remote sensing satellites from NASA. He also used data from the Landsat program and images from the Space Shuttle Challenger. A whole lot of technology went into pinpointing the ruins, which appear to have been swallowed by the desert almost 2,000 years ago. It's impossible to say if Ubar is the same city as Iram in the Quran, but they certainly share some parallels. Both of them were washed over by the sand of the desert and lost forever. Isles of the Blessed. The Fortunate Isles, or the Isles of the Blessed, were legendary cities in Greek mythology that were said to be situated in the Atlantic Ocean. The Greeks believed the Fortunate Isles were paradise. According to legends, the islands never saw winter, and there was an abundance of delicious food. Everyone who lived on the island enjoyed a life of ease and pleasure. The Greeks believed that only those who lived 3 pure lives were given access to the mythical islands, an accomplishment only their greatest heroes ever achieved. But just how real were the islands of paradise? Flavius, a famous Greek philosopher, said the islands could be found beyond the Libyan desert in the ocean. The Greek historian Plutarch claimed the Isles of the Blessed could be located a few days from Hispania. He also described the islands as a place where the air is always sweet, and the dwellers are happy because of the abundance of fruit. Interestingly, fruit was a main theme of the Isles of the Blessed. Famous Roman historian Pliny the Elder claimed the islands were abound in fruit and birds of every kind. It seems fairly obvious that the Greeks knew about a tropical island paradise where fruit grew wild and the trees were full of birds. It could have been any island off the coast of Africa, maybe the Canary Islands, or maybe even an island that has since been swallowed by the sea. We just have no idea which island or islands these ancient historians were talking about. The good news is that now we don't need to live 3 pure lives to go to a tropical island. We can just get on a plane and go. Which island do you think the Greeks were talking about? Let me know in the comments below. Crater Lake. Crater Lake has inspired a lot of legends over the years. It's considered one of the most sinister places in all of Oregon, despite its natural beauty. The lake is shrouded in dark histories and plagued by mysterious phenomena. Crater Lake is 21 square miles and about 2,000 feet deep. It's the deepest lake in the U.S., and for centuries it was believed to be bottomless. The lake formed around 6,000 years ago when a volcano collapsed, and its caldera was filled with rain and snow. There's even a weird island in the middle of the caldera called Wizard Island, and a slightly smaller one known as Phantom Ship Island. The Klamath tribes who lived near Crater Lake before Europeans arrived long associated the place with dangerous beings. According to their legends, the bottomless lake was a doorway between the darkness of the underworld and the light of Earth. The Klamath also said that if you stared too long at the surface of the lake, you would be unable to look away and would eventually fall in and drown. Old tribal myths aren't the only things that make Crater Lake spooky. Since 1853, it's been a site where unexplained deaths and disappearances have occurred. One example is photographer Charles McCullough, who went to take photographs of the lake in 1975 and was never seen again. It was only a year later that his toe and his shin bones were uncovered, but the rest of his body was never found. The Tower of Babel. The myth of the Tower of Babel can be traced back to chapter 11 in the book of Genesis from the Bible. A tower was built by a united humanity, a world of people who came together and settled their differences. They used a single language and pooled their resources in order to achieve greatness. The story is a perfect example of what humanity could accomplish if we put aside our differences and work together. They decided to build a tower so spectacular that they could climb it to heaven. God was not pleased by this. He thought that humanity was arrogant, and so he destroyed their tower. He also shattered the language they shared into individual languages, which confused humanity and once again turned the people against each other. In essence, God ruined the human race and doomed us to thousands of years of war for trying to build a tall tower. This story has its roots in reality. The narrative might be fanciful, but the Tower of Babel was likely a real place. Historians believe the tower was based on a ziggurat built in ancient Sumer. They don't know which one, but the biblical description of the tower is very similar. Both the Tower of Babel and ancient Sumerian ziggurats were giant stairways climbing to the heavens. Mount Nysa. Mount Nysa is said to be the birthplace of Dionysus, the Greek god of winemaking, ritual madness, insanity, and partying. The cult of Dionysus in ancient Greece was one of the most popular, most likely because it was the most fun. Cultists who worshipped and revered Dionysus did so by drinking too much wine and getting wild. Dionysus was the party god and was all about drinking alcohol and partaking in earthly pleasures. It should come as no surprise that he was one of the most depicted gods in Greek mythology. Temples to Dionysus can be found all over the ancient world, especially in Turkey. But when it comes to his origin story, things are a little more mysterious. Greek mythology says that Dionysus was raised on Mount Nysa by the rain nymphs called the Hyades. The mountain is mentioned all throughout Greek lore, and by the Romans and Egyptians as well, but the exact location of the mountain isn't known. Some say it was in Ethiopia, while others say it was in Egypt, and it's even been placed as far away as India. When Alexander the Great showed up at the city of Nysa in India, they pleaded with him not to destroy the city because it was founded by Dionysus after he came down from a nearby mountain. Teonimanu. Teonimanu is a lost island that was once part of the Solomon Islands in the Pacific Ocean. According to native lore, the people of Teonimanu had a unique and distinctive culture. They crafted magnificent artifacts out of wood, and they were full of mystery. The most important story of these lost people has to do with a beautiful woman named Sawete'au. She grew tired of her current husband, so she ran away with another man. Then she returned to her home and kicked her original husband out onto the street. Furious and embarrassed, the scorned husband steered his canoe to a nearby island where he purchased a curse. He then used that curse to destroy the island of Teonimanu, and in doing so, he drowned his wife and her lover. The truth is that Teonimanu was a very real island that was swallowed by the ocean. It happened after an earthquake caused an underwater ridge to become unstable. There was a landslide underwater, and the land that the island sat on slipped down at a sharp angle. It looked like tsunami waves washed over the island, carrying it away in the process. But really, it was the victim of an underwater landslide. The only reason we even know this island existed is because of the myth of the scorned husband, passed along orally for the last several centuries since the island sank into the sea. The Lighthouse of Alexandria. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was a real place, although nobody alive right now has ever seen it. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, constructed on the small island of Pharos just outside Alexandria's harbor between 300 and 280 BC. The lighthouse had a height of 330 feet, and it stood for more than 1,600 years. The lighthouse was originally designed to be a beacon that protected sailors as they steered into the city's harbor. It was commissioned by Alexander the Great's general, Ptolemy I Soter, the man who took over Egypt following the death of Alexander. Even though the lighthouse is considered one of the greatest architectural marvels of all time, it took only 20 years to build. Some cathedrals took over 200 years to build. Alexandria was a much different place when the lighthouse was still standing. You would have been able to visit Alexander's tomb, the legendary Museum of Alexandria, the Serapeum Temple, and the city's famous library. These days, the library has been rebuilt, but the temple is in ruins, and the tomb of Alexander is lost, with little hope of ever being found. Alexandria remained a mythical place full of legendary buildings and grand pieces of architecture right up until the 14th century AD. We have no idea what happened to the lighthouse, but it suddenly vanished from historical records. In the 15th century, the broken foundations of the tower were used to build the Kate Bay Fort, which still stands today. But all signs of the lighthouse are gone. The Trojan Horse. According to legends, the Trojan War came to an end when the hero Odysseus came up with a brilliant plan. The Greeks and Trojans had been at war for years. But finally, the Greeks built a huge wooden horse as a gift to the Trojans and left it outside the city walls. The Greeks then loaded up their boats and pretended to sail away. The Trojans thought the Greeks had surrendered and dragged the enormous horse into their city, unaware that it was filled with Greek warriors. When night came, the Greeks poured out of the horse and carried out their plan. They opened the city gates and destroyed Troy. The mythical city of Troy was a real place on the shores of Turkey, located at a spot called Hisarlik. Archaeologists know this because of archaeological evidence that can't be refuted. But was a wooden horse really used as a weapon of war? Or was it just literary flair in Homer's story? Some have speculated that the Trojan horse was the name of a siege engine. In ancient Greece, it was normal to drape siege engines in wet horsehide so that the enemy couldn't set them on fire while attacking a city. The myth of the horse could have come from a real siege engine used to destroy Troy's walls. However, another theory is that the story was a misinterpretation of events. Some historians believe an earthquake may have breached Troy's walls. Then, because Poseidon wasn't just the god of the ocean, but also the god of horses and earthquakes, people mixed up their details. Rather than an earthquake destroying the walls, people began to say it was a horse. Eventually, the horse became wooden and filled with Greek soldiers.
Island of Diego Garcia. The island of Diego Garcia is home to what some have called the most secretive United States military base in the world. It can be found in the middle of the Indian Ocean, used by U.S. forces as a launch pad for operations throughout the Middle East. The base is in territory previously owned by the British Empire. However, over the years, the island changed hands numerous times. These days, the only people allowed to know what's happening on the island are certified military personnel and the people who physically live there. Nobody else is allowed to step foot on the shoreline. The island is more secretive than Guantanamo Bay, leaving many to wonder what truly goes on inside the base on Diego Garcia. The history of the island dates back to the year 1599, when it was discovered by a Portuguese expedition. But the island was too small to be cared about, so it remained uninhabited until around 1800. Then, after signing an agreement with the British government, the US built a naval communications station in 1965. What they've done with it since is up for speculation. Controversies have been swirling ever since the late 1960s, when the locals were forcibly removed from the island. Everyone knew the military was up to something, but nobody was ever able to say what. In 2008, there were claims that the island was being used as a secret prison, a CIA black site. It was here where the U.S. military allegedly held and tortured persons of interest outside the laws of the United States of America. The most recent conspiracy theory is that Diego Garcia is home to the missing flight MH370 that vanished in March of 2014. They say the military shot the plane down, recovered it, and then brought it back to the base. Although it's not exactly clear why they would do this. What do you think is happening in Diego Garcia? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I want to give a big shout out to Bill Evans and Marcia Shelley. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Ancient Athenian Base. A mysterious naval base from over 2,000 years ago was recently discovered submerged near the Greek city of Athens. The base dates back to 493 BC, when the Greek general Themistocles insisted the Athenian government fund a naval facility and build more ships to defend against the Persians. The Persians had attacked Greece a few years earlier, nearly defeating them at the Battle of Marathon. When they showed up a second time, they came by sea. However, it was thanks to Themistocles that Athens was ready with a huge fleet of ships and a powerful naval base. The Persians were humiliated and defeated, and afterward, they were sent home with their tails between their legs. It was a major world event that stopped Persian expansion into Europe. If it hadn't been for Themistocles and his idea to build a naval base, the Persians likely would have taken over Europe, and the world today would be a lot different. Now, after 2,000 years, a team of archaeologists believe they have found the remnants of that very naval base. Dr. Bjorn Lovin from the University of Copenhagen and his team found ship sheds, fortifications, and other remnants of what may have been the biggest coastal base of the ancient Mediterranean. In the press release, the archaeologists said they found pottery, pieces of wood, and other vestiges of ship houses. These were buildings used to hold the massive warships that fought against the Persians in the Battle of Salamis, which took place in 480 BC. This is one of the most impressive naval discoveries in decades. The shipyard played a massive role in the development of the Athenian navy, which soon became the backbone of the first democratic society in Europe. Mystery Volcano Base. Like something straight out of a James Bond movie, a mysterious air base recently appeared on a volcanic island off the coast of Yemen. Initial reports suggested no country claimed the airbase being developed on Mayoun Island, though it can likely be linked back to the United Arab Emirates. This isn't an ancient base by any means, but a newly built military installation at a crucial maritime choke point. Huge shipments of energy and commercial cargo move past the volcanic island on a regular basis. Whoever controls the airbase here can easily launch missile strikes into Yemen, and it can even serve as a main hub for operations in the Red Sea and East Africa. It was the Associated Press who obtained satellite images of the base in April of 2021. Within just a month, there was a 6,000-foot runway and 3 huge hangars that seemed to appear out of nowhere since there hadn't been any recorded activity on the island. Somebody built an entire airbase on a volcanic piece of rock and they never even owned up to it. The base is just sitting there waiting to be used, potentially in some kind of surprise attack. Lights near San Diego. During the summer of 2022, residents in San Diego were shocked by some mysterious lights spotted hovering in the sky. Dozens of these strange lights suddenly showed up, and people all over the city posted their recordings of the phenomenon on social media. There was no obvious indication of what the lights could be, and for a minute, it seemed like there might be an imminent alien attack. But then, the San Diego Police Department came to the rescue. The next morning, they told reporters with ABC News that the lights were flares being used for military exercises. However, when asked about the lights, the 2 nearby military facilities claimed they didn't know what they were. The Naval Air Station North Island and Camp Pendleton claimed ignorance to the light show, even as the police said they were confirmed by military officials. The lights hovering in the sky were just military flares, but they sure didn't seem like flares to the locals. The lights were seen floating over the ocean. Some of them were bright orange, while others were bright red. They were also seen blinking and pulsing in strange patterns. We still don't know what exactly happened that hot summer night. The lights were miles off the coast and burning bright enough that they must have been outputting a serious amount of energy. There are several military bases in San Diego, so there is the possibility the lights did come from an exercise. San Diego is reportedly home to about 60% of the ships in the U.S. Navy's fleet. Still, the whole incident was extremely suspicious. Adak Island. Adak Island is a small landmass at the very edge of the border between the United States and Russia. It's a pretty miserable place in Alaska that's buffeted by hard winds and is almost perpetually covered in clouds, on top of being cold all year. It even has an ice-capped mountain called Mount Moffett, which stands almost 4,000 feet tall. The island has been home to the Aleut people for centuries, although nobody knows exactly how many inhabitants live there. The Aleut are native to the Aleutian Islands, first discovered by Russian missionaries in the late 18th century. The Russian missionaries converted the natives into Christians. Then the Russian traders established their own settlements on the island. There was a huge demand for fur, which the Aleut people could easily supply. But in the late 1700s, there was a revolt. The Aleuts fought back against the Russian traders who treated them poorly, but unfortunately, this only resulted in a brutal massacre. The Russians had far more strength than the native islanders, and as a result, a large portion of the Aleut population was decimated. The leaders were killed, and those who remained fled to smaller islands in an attempt to hide. These days, most Aleut are recognized as U.S. citizens. There are an estimated 17,000 Aleuts living in the U.S., with only 700 in Russia. Adak Island is only one of the places they inhabit, with the biggest settlement on the island having only about 300 people. The island was also taken over by the Imperial Japanese Army in World War II and was used as a military base by the US all the way through the Cold War. In the 1990s, there were about 6,000 people on the island, but when the base closed, the island became a ghost town. That's why there are only around 300 people left, most of whom live an easy life of fishing on the northern point of Adak. Would you be able to live in the freezing cold weather? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. The Mare Island Naval Shipyard. The very first United States Navy base ever established in the Pacific Ocean was the Mare Island Naval Shipyard. It was built 25 miles from San Francisco in the small city of Vallejo in September of 1854. It soon became the most important naval facility on the west coast of North America. Throughout the 19th century, the Mare Island Naval Shipyard handled a huge amount of work from American, Japanese, and Russian vessels. The shipyard then continued to be used throughout the First World War. It was here where German forces may have sabotaged a gunpowder magazine containing over 100,000 pounds of black powder. The potential sabotage killed 6 people and severely damaged the site. Then, in the Second World War, activity at the base went through the roof. There was an ammunition depot, a hospital, testing lab, and even a school for firefighters. However, during the Second World War, the shipyard reached capacity. It was housing over 50,000 employees and simply couldn't get any bigger. After the war ended, the shipyard continued to be used, but at a much lower capacity. But eventually it was abandoned in 1996. The shipyard is still physically standing today, but it is now deserted. St. Catherine's Fort. On St. Catherine's Island in Wales stands a 19th century fortification that was built by a committee known as the Royal Commission on the Defense of the United Kingdom. The fortress was constructed just in case the Emperor of France, Napoleon III, decided he would invade the British Isles. Lord Palmerston desperately needed to find a way to defend the dockyard and anchorage at Milford Haven. Any enemy force would easily be able to land their ships and attack the beaches. So, the commissioners came up with an idea for a string of fortified islands, coastal artillery that would devastate any invading force. However, only a single fortress was ever constructed, the St. Catherine's Fort. Work on the base began in 1867. It was a monumental task bringing huge blocks of solid granite from the mainland to the island. It took a massive workforce and would finally be completed 3 years later, but it wouldn't be for another 16 years before gun shields could be installed. The year after, the gun shields were officially declared useless and outdated. Plus, Napoleon never sent his ships, meaning the island never needed to be used for anything. It was such a hassle to build the first fortress that the government didn't bother with any additional ones. It basically became a complete waste of space, but it was used briefly as a zoo in 1968. Nowadays, though, the entire fort is completely abandoned. Chinese submarine secrets. China appears to be expanding their power in the South China Sea. Recent satellite photographs have revealed what appears to be a giant submarine base slowly getting bigger. Images show that Yulin Naval Base, which is located on the tip of Hainan Island, is under construction. 2 new piers showed up on a chunk of newly reclaimed land, each one measuring between 500 and 800 feet long. These are entirely new, built seemingly in secret to house even more submarines in the South Sea Fleet. The fleet already has vehicles that can dive underwater undetected and are armed with nuclear ballistic missiles. The Yulin Naval Base is home to Jin-class nuclear-powered subs and smaller Type 093 submarines, which are also nuclear-powered. The Yulin Naval Base is one of the most mysterious in China. The facility was carved into the side of a mountain, making it impossible to see what's going on underneath the thousands of tons of rock. We have no idea what they're working on, only that the base must be full, because it's expanding outward. Russia's Island Fortress. There is an island far away in the outer reaches of Siberia that was once home to a massive fortress. It's called Porbazin, and it was likely built by the Uyghur people around the 8th century AD. It was originally constructed to be an impenetrable fortress in the middle of a vast lake, but the fortress was abandoned at some point and was later converted into a monastery, only to be deserted again and burned down. The island was filled from edge to edge with stone, making the fortress look as though it was floating on the water. In the winter, when Lake Terekol freezes, you can walk across the solid ice to the ruins and step back in time. The island was completely blocked off on all sides by tall stone walls. Inside were a pair of massive courtyards, a single palace in the center, and smaller building complexes along the walls. The only way in was through a grand gateway, or of course, by crossing the lake. Khorbazin was rediscovered in 1891, but at that point, nobody really cared about it. Fieldwork didn't start until Russian archaeologist S.I. Van Stein took an interest in 1957. Modern research wasn't completed until the late 2000s. Archaeologists now believe the fortification was the capital of the Uyghur Khaganate starting around 750 AD. However, nobody knows what happened to those who lived here, and it's unclear why the island fortress was abandoned. Maybe the people were scared away by invaders, or maybe they got tired of living in the center of a frozen lake. Doesn't seem that practical. The seeds of death. Grunard Island is absolutely terrifying. For decades, the island was so dangerous that nobody was allowed access to it. That's because it was contaminated by mad scientists in World War II who carried out chemical warfare experiments, germ warfare to be specific. There's a reason Grunard Island is nicknamed Anthrax Island. The whole place was dusted in the lethal bacteria so that nothing could live on it. The experiments began in 1942. The Scottish Highlands were suddenly buzzing with soldiers carrying out secret operations for Prime Minister Winston Churchill. He and other world leaders feared the Nazis had already developed a devastating biological bomb. After the chemical warfare horror of World War I, nobody was ready to start messing around with chemicals. But if a bomb was to be dropped, Churchill wanted the British to have their own weapon so they could retaliate if necessary. So they found a remote island and started dropping anthrax on it. Nobody knew what was happening, although locals were a bit surprised that the sheep, cows, and horses began to unexpectedly drop dead. The locals were kept in the dark about what was happening on the island until the project was declassified 50 years later. In 1986, scientists finally decided it was time to fix the island. They sprayed the soil with formaldehyde and took all the necessary precautions, and luckily, after 4 years, Grunard Island was cleared of anthrax. The Legend of Achilles. One of the greatest literary mysteries in history is the Iliad, written by Homer in the 8th century BC. The book is widely recognized as one of the oldest pieces of literature still enjoyed by modern readers. You probably read it in high school. Within the book, Homer describes a lot of real places and events, but he also discusses several people who may not have existed. The issue historians have had is separating fact from fiction. For example, the mighty warrior named Achilles. Was he a man or a myth? Achilles, if Homer is to be believed, was born of the goddess Thetis and the immortal king Peleus. In Homer's story, Achilles had a horrible temper and raging arrogance. As one of the central figures in the story, Achilles goes through a long journey of becoming a better person. By the end of the book, he is less angry and impulsive, and he's gained some personal dignity. But that doesn't really answer the question of whether or not he was flesh and blood. The truth is that this mystery will probably never be solved unless we can find his tomb. Achilles would have lived in the 12th century BC, during what we call the Bronze Age. Until just a few years ago, Troy itself and the Trojan War were seen as myths. But archaeologists eventually found the glorious city in Turkey and evidence of a great battle that took place. Archaeologists also believe King Agamemnon was a real person, the leader of the Macedonians who fought against the Trojans. So, there is a real possibility Achilles fought in the Trojan War. But without his tomb, he will forever just be a legend. What do you think? Do you think Achilles was real? Let me know in the comments. Unlucky 13. 13 is the unluckiest number in the world, and it's mainly because of Judas Iscariot. According to the Gospels, Judas was the 13th guest at the Last Supper, right before he betrayed Jesus Christ for some silver. As an interesting side note, there is a story from Norse mythology in which Loki, god of mischief, arrives as the 13th person to a feast in Valhalla, and then tricks someone into killing Baldur, Thor's half-brother. 13 has always been a naughty number in the eyes of Christians. Then, on October 13th, 1307, King Philip IV of France had the Knights Templar arrested and burned alive. adding even more negativity to the number. What you might find interesting is that the number 13 was not always considered unlucky. Before Christianity, 13 was a lucky number. It was seen as a number representing rebirth. 12 was always a number representing completeness. For example, there were 12 Olympian gods in ancient Greece. Hercules completed 12 labors. Jacob had 12 sons. There were 12 disciples of Jesus, 12 days of Christmas, 12 tribes of Israel, and 12 lunar months as well. 13 was the number that came after, considered transformative in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians believed life unfolded in 12 main stages, and the 13th was the stage of the afterlife. Not just any afterlife, but the glorious and eternal afterlife. It was most likely the Christians who ruined the number and made it unlucky. What do you think about the number 13? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe. Pushkar and the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden, as described in the Bible, has never been found by modern archaeologists. Nobody knows if the mythical garden where Adam and Eve lived at the beginning of days truly existed. But there are some juicy candidates, with one being in a rather peculiar place. Pushkar, located in the western state of Rajasthan, India, may have been the real location for the Garden of Eden. It has features described in the Bible, with 4 flowing rivers emerging from a great holy mountain as described in Genesis and Ezekiel. The 4 rivers emerge from the Pushkar Mountains on the north, east, south, and west. These days, the rivers are known as Nahar, Dai, Sagarmati, and Saraswati. But it's not surprising to think that after 10 or 20,000 years, depending on which biblical timeline you believe, the rivers change their names. In the Bible, the 4 rivers around Eden are called Parath, Hiddekel, Pishon, and Gihon. But what else does the Bible say about Eden? According to the book of Ezekiel, the Garden of God was located on the holy mountain. Pushkar is also located on a holy mountain. In Indian legend, Pushkar is the ancient city where Lord Brahma, the Hindu creator god, first came to Earth. Lord Brahma was so amazed at the beautiful scenery, lush forests, and the colorful birds that he stayed there for 1,000 years. Pushkar truly is a place of paradise, and it could be the real Garden of Eden. And now for number 7. I want to say a big thank you to History Hype and David Shivulu for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about history's unsolved mysteries. The Irish Giant. Charles Byrne was the Irish Giant. He was born in 1761 and would grow to become one of the tallest human beings that we know of. In 1780s London, he was considered a freak. His height at the time was debated, with some saying he was over 8 feet 4 inches, but his skeleton suggests he was only 7 feet 7 inches. Either way, he was a very real giant. Charles' skeleton was even put on display at the Hunterian Museum in London following his death in 1783. Charles explicitly asked his family and friends to throw his body into the ocean upon his passing so that scientists wouldn't dissect him, but his cadaver was stolen, dissected, and put on display in a case anyway. It remained behind glass until 2023. It took almost 200 years for the museum to finally acknowledge Charles as a person and give him his dignity back. But why are we talking about a man who lived in the 18th century? Well, because he's a giant. Scientists say that Charles suffered from a growth disorder, and there wasn't anything supernatural or exciting about him. He had what scientists call acromegalic gigantism. When Charles was 22 years old, he suffered an early and painful death because of his condition. But what if Charles wasn't simply a human being? Charles had his DNA extracted by German researchers in 2011. They found that he had a rare mutation in his AIP gene. They were able to link this gene to 4 families living in Northern Ireland. Researchers believe Charles had a common ancestor with these families about 1,600 years ago. But what if their lineage goes even further back, thousands of years ago, to a time when the world was ruled by real giants? Do you believe in giants? Let me know in the comments. The Zuni and the Kachinas. The Zuni are a group of Native Americans who lived in the Zuni River Valley of New Mexico when Europeans arrived and began to conquer the land. They still live there today. recognized by the federal government and in possession of trust lands in New Mexico and Arizona. But several thousand years ago, the Zuni lived in stone adobe houses. They existed in the American Southwest 4,000 years ago, surviving by hunting. Then, about 1,000 years ago, they started to irrigate the land and farm maize, aka a type of corn. In the Zuni religion, they worshipped a group of beings known as the Kachina. Zuni legend says the Kachina came down from the heavens, greeted the Zuni elders, and brought them sacred knowledge of the sky. They didn't necessarily start human civilization, but they did bring great wisdom and understanding. This knowledge helped the Zuni shift from primitive hunting and gathering to farming and city dwelling. The Kachina gods were loved by all the Zuni and were depicted as curious humanoids with colorful skin and strange headdresses, almost like space helmets. The mystery here is that historians don't know what to think of the Kachina, so you know what that means. Many ancient alien enthusiasts believe they were alien astronauts who came from the stars to help the Zuni become more advanced as a civilization. The thing is that the theorists could just ask the Zuni themselves, because, like I said, they are still around. Mystery craters. Craters have been appearing all across Turkey and nobody knows what's going on. According to local farmers, giant sinkholes that look like they've been blasted into farmland using laser beams have been opening at an alarming rate. It's a problem that's always affected farmers who frequently irrigate their land. All that irrigation has the potential to erode away the fragile earth beneath and lead to sinkholes opening. But now the phenomenon is happening everywhere. Giant craters are opening in snowy fields to the north, appearing in the middle of fields, and they've even begun to open in residential areas. Authorities are terrified that if the mystery craters continue to appear, they could start to swallow entire buildings, which has already happened. Just look at Florida and Guatemala. The land is starting to look like Swiss cheese, and nobody knows what to do. Have you ever seen a sinkhole up close? Let me know in the comments. Ancient Aztec secrets. Archaeologists in Mexico have always been curious as to how the ancient Aztecs tracked the sun across the sky and maintained a perfect calendar for farming. Now researchers may have finally figured it out. They think they know how Mexica temples were used and how the Aztec used tall mountains as their natural observatories. For the first time in history, archaeologists may be revealing some unsolved mysteries of Aztec star seekers. Based on the accounts of Spanish conquistadors, we know Mexico City, previously known as Tenochtitlan, was a thriving metropolis in 1519, with about 3 million people living inside its borders. To maintain such a high population, Aztec scientists had to predict seasonal changes, prepare irrigation ditches, and successfully produce food to feed everyone. To do this, Aztec astronomer priests watched the sun very carefully to know exactly which day it was and which month it was in the year. Researchers from land-grant University Riverside recently studied the Aztec sky watchers to try and understand them better. The team came to the conclusion that sky watchers would stand at a single spot on the highest mountain peak they could find and look east. They would just stand there every single day and watch the sunrise. One of the likely spots where this happened was Mount Tlaloc, close to the border with Puebla. It was a ceremonial site used in the 7th century AD, but up until now, nobody had known what kind of ceremonies it was used for. Now, researchers think this was the very place where the designated watcher came to view the sunrise every day and keep track of the dates. That sounds like a nice job. Mystery spheres. Giant stone spheres have been discovered all over the planet. Excavators in Siberia found a collection of huge, perfectly smooth giant spheres in a coal mine. Each one was about 3 feet across and looked to be artificially made. They looked like concrete cannonballs. But the discovery in Russia wasn't the only one. The Moki marbles of the western United States are another example of perfectly smooth spheres being dug out of the ground. On the north coast of California, on the shoreline where the water is slowly eroding the cliffs, people have discovered dozens of similar stone orbs. Fittingly, they call this place Bowling Ball Beach because there are so many perfect stone spheres that look like natural bowling balls. And in Bosnia, a truly megalithic stone sphere over 7 feet tall was found buried in a wooded hillside, leading many to speculate it was created by an ancient civilization. Samir Osmanagic, a local archaeologist in Bosnia, says the 9-foot-wide stone ball found in the Visoko Valley was made by a lost and unknown group of people. He says a mysterious civilization lived in the valley 1,000 years ago, and that they were responsible for building preposterously large balls. However, Samir is about the only archaeologist who believes this. Experts say the spheres that have been found across the globe are nothing but concretions. These are natural rocks that form when small mineral particles become stuck together. These small particles get wedged between larger bits of sand and dirt, and over millions of years form perfectly circular balls. It's like building a snowman, but with dirt and without moving. Squatters writes, the custom of Ti Inus, translated into English as house in one night, was something that may or may not have happened in Wales during the 17th and 18th centuries. The custom was a strange one, and it came about at a time when young people were finding it more difficult to own land in their home villages. People started building houses and squatting in them. According to the legend, if you could build a house on common land between sunset and sunrise, you could claim that land to be legally yours. If you could complete a fully functioning house with smoke billowing up from the chimney before the sun came up, you had earned yourself the right to the land. The thing about the tradition is nobody knows if it really happened. Mr. William from the St. Fagan's National Museum of History in Cardiff says the tradition is widely acknowledged, but finding genuine examples is virtually impossible. He says there are no surviving examples of the original structures used by squatters to get themselves some free property. This could be because they would often build a sturdier house in the months following the construction of the original dwelling. One of the houses purported to be an original Ti Inus cottage is the Ugly House in Wales, Snowdonia. It's a crude thing built out of rock and timber, but most experts believe it was built in the 19th century. What do you think about this practice? Could you build a house in one night? Let me know in the comments. The Eye of Ra. The mystery of the Eye of Ra is one that stretches back over 3,000 years. It's one of the most powerful ancient symbols that we know about, but nobody knows its exact origin. Archaeologists know it was important because the Eye of Ra has been discovered painted on walls of temples and made into amulets. Pharaohs used the Eye of Ra to defend themselves against negative energy. They believed that by having an amulet shaped like the eye, they could defend themselves against enemies and black magic. The amulet would be painted dark red to better protect against evil spells. The Eye of Ra had a lot of different meanings to ancient Egyptians. This is why it's so hard to figure out where it originally came from and how it grew to be one of the most popular symbols in Egypt. The Egyptians likely saw the Eye of Ra as a representation of the sun and its destructive power. But the eye was also a symbol of royal authority, something wielded by the pharaohs. Of course, many believe the eye had a much more esoteric meaning. It may have represented a third eye, a source of inner power most humans have totally forgotten about. Do you believe in the power of the third eye or the Eye of Ra? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Plastered skulls of Tel Aswad. During the Neolithic Age, 11,000 years ago, Tel Aswad in modern-day Syria was an extremely early farming village. It was one of the first farming villages in the world, excavated by archaeologists between 2001 and 2007. It's always been a place of great importance to researchers who want to understand more about the origins of early farming life in the Near East. While a lot of great discoveries have been made here about the transition from early hunter to early farmer, there have been some other strange finds as well. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence of life in the village, revealing that the people who lived in Tel Aswad were deeply religious and artistic. They have found the remains of mud brick buildings, tools crafted from bone, woven baskets, figurines molded out of earth, and even plastered human skulls. The plastered skulls are arguably the most interesting artifacts that have been found here. They are leftover relics of an unknown funerary ceremony that was practiced throughout the region. Similar skulls have also been found in Turkey and Palestine. But what's the archaeological significance of these ancient human skulls? Unfortunately, scientists don't really have the answers. We know that during the Neolithic period, people in the Levant would be buried underneath the floors of their own homes. Their skulls were often removed, then covered over in a plaster mold and painted like a Halloween decoration. The eyeballs were removed and replaced with shells, but we don't know why it was done. Some experts believe it was a way to worship ancestors, while others argue these skulls may have been trophies for headhunters. I want to give a big shout out to Alif Abu and Dale Leander-Toller. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. We really appreciate your feedback. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Mystery of the Scrolls. Could the Dead Sea Scrolls lead to a secret hidden treasure? A lot of people seem to think so, and many have gone looking for that very treasure. It all started in either 1946 or 1947, when a group of teenagers in the desert near the ancient settlement of Qumran accidentally discovered clay jars inside a cave. These clay jars contained leather and papyrus scrolls. The teenagers had unwittingly come across the now famous Dead Sea Scrolls, and in the years that followed, countless treasure hunters and archaeologists spent untold hours retrieving thousands of scroll fragments hidden throughout desert caves in the area. In total, they managed to acquire about 900 manuscripts, almost the entirety of the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible was written down in tiny sections, then scattered throughout the desert and hidden inside clay pots 2,000 years ago. The only complete book found among the Dead Sea Scrolls was Isaiah, which was created in the 1st century BC. Nobody knows who wrote the scrolls, although it's generally accepted that they were written by a communal sect of Jews known as the Essenes. This group wrote down all the religious knowledge they had, along with other information about themselves and their past. They also kept record of their religious laws, as well as their role as a community. And if the rumors are to be believed, they also included an ancient treasure map called the Copper Scroll. The Copper Scroll contains directions to dozens of hidden caches of gold and silver. And while most of the Dead Sea Scrolls were written on parchment or animal skin, this one was chiseled onto sheets of metal. It describes 64 hiding places of treasure, but as far as we know, not a single one of them has ever been found. The Bald Queen. Scientists have recently revealed some shocking information about one of history's favorite queens. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass announced the discovery of an elderly female mummy in the Valley of the Kings. The mummy was recovered from tomb KV60 and was identified as Hatshepsut, who ruled Egypt in the 15th century BC. This was a huge announcement because Hatshepsut is now the only royal mummy that's officially been identified since the discovery of Tutankhamun over a century ago. The incredible find was made thanks to a CT scan of a single tooth. The tooth was found in a box with the queen's name written on it, and it matched perfectly to the tooth socket inside the mummy's jaw. She was also connected to the royal lineage by DNA analysis. The identification of Hatshepsut is a phenomenal step forward in the world of Egyptology, but researchers found something else that some may find a little shocking. As it turns out, Hatshepsut wasn't about to win any beauty pageants. A full biological analysis of her remains has shown that she was 50 years old when she died, and that she was borderline obese. She also suffered from diabetes, and apparently she was slightly bald. The queen had lost a lot of her hair in the front, and she let it grow longer in the back, giving her an Egyptian mullet. She also had her nails painted black and red, which is surprisingly punk rock for an Egyptian monarch. Mastodon bones. The oldest bone projectile in the Americas is 13,900 years old. This amazing piece of human history was discovered at the Manus Mastodon site in Washington during an excavation in the 1970s. However, it was only recently that scientists were able to use new technology to do a full analysis on the ancient bone projectile. We now know it's the oldest artifact of its kind, and it was crafted from the bone of a prehistoric relative of the modern-day elephant. The bone projectile looks nothing like what you may be imagining. It's not an immaculately carved arrowhead. It's quite literally just a pointy bone. Researchers say it was the tip of an ancient weapon. one that was found lodged in the rib of a mastodon. This thing may have been attached to a large stick, then used as a spear by early hunters to take down the biggest land animal they could find. These types of hunting tools potentially help to wipe out animals like the woolly mammoth and the mastodon. The bone projectile point is currently the oldest evidence of people hunting mastodons in North America. Scientists went a step further with their analysis than usual, creating a 3D image of the weapon where it stuck into the mastodon's ribs. By doing this, they were able to recreate the original spear, showing the weapon used by the Paleo-American hunter. Researchers say the hunter likely tried to pierce the lung of the animal, but missed their shot and got their weapon stuck in a rib bone instead. The breached walls of Jerusalem. For the first time in history, archaeologists in Israel have found the exact place where Emperor Titus and his legions breached the walls of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. It happened in approximately 70 AD, when Emperor Vespasian's son Titus broke through the defensive walls of Jerusalem and conquered the city before destroying the Second Temple. This was one of the most significant events in the history of Judaism, shattering the world for the Jews of Israel. Not only was their holy city destroyed, but afterward they found themselves under the heel of the Roman Empire. This invasion ushered in centuries of abuse and persecution at the hands of Rome. Archaeologists made their discovery by complete accident. The excavation was conducted by a team with the Israeli Antiquities Authority ahead of the construction of a new campus at an art school. The school is located in the Russian compound of Jerusalem. When archaeologists did their excavation, they found the ruins of a watchtower that was once used by Jewish rebels positioned on the outer wall of Jerusalem. Nearby, they found stones that had clearly been fired from ballistae, ancient catapults, no doubt by the Roman army during the siege. These huge stones would have been responsible for shattering the walls of the city, allowing the scores of Roman soldiers to pour in like fish through a broken dam. Pontius Pilatus' Lost Road. Archaeologists in Jerusalem have identified a lost street that was built by the same name who condemned Jesus to be crucified. His name was Pontius Pilate, and he was the Roman prefect of Judea 2,000 years ago. He's most famous today for being the man who oversaw the trial and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Up until recently, physical evidence of Pontius' existence has been limited. What this means is that there was no real way to say if this guy existed or not, since there just wasn't enough proof. But now we know for certain that he was a real person. Researchers discovered a street that he built as one of his public building projects. The street was about 2,000 feet long, connecting the sacred Siloam pool to the Temple Mount. The street would have been used by pilgrims traveling from the pool to the temple around 30 AD. Researchers also discovered dozens of coins from between 30 and 31 AD, with Pontius Pilatus' name inscribed on them. This has confirmed beyond any doubt that he wasn't just a character in a story. He was the real prefect of Judea during the days of Jesus. Knowing that Pontius Pilate was a real person adds to the mounting evidence that Jesus Christ was a real individual as well. Historically speaking, scholars are fairly certain that Jesus existed as a man, but whether or not he was the Son of God is still a major subject that's up for debate. The Amphipolis Tomb. In Amphipolis, northern Greece, archaeologists discovered a tomb from the 4th century BC. Just recently, the Greek Ministry of Culture announced the results of the analysis of the skeletons found inside. The news came as a huge surprise because the bones belonged to 5 people instead of just 1. It was believed the tomb belonged to someone of great importance, but now it looks like it was used as a family tomb. The Amphipolis tomb was used as a burial place for a prestigious family 2,400 years ago. The tomb was first found within Casta Hill, not far from the ancient city of Amphipolis. The whole region was conquered by Philip II of Macedon in 357 BC. He was the king of Macedonia and the father of Alexander the Great. The tomb was first discovered back in the 1960s, but archaeologists only began excavations in 2012. Researchers became excited when they found the remains of a massive marble wall that extended over 1,600 feet. This had once been an extremely luxurious tomb, complete with sphinxes and mosaics. When they finally went inside, they found a limestone sarcophagus and hundreds of bone fragments. 550 bone fragments to be exact, as if the bones had been pulverized on purpose. We still have no idea who these people were in such a lavish tomb. There was a woman who died in her 60s, 2 men in their 30s, a newborn infant, and an unknown individual who was cremated. The tomb's residents are a massive mystery, one scientists may never solve. Would you want to be buried in a place like this with all your family? Let me know in the comments. New treasures at Pompeii. Archaeologists are still busy at work trying to unravel the secrets of Pompeii. The city that remained virtually untouched for 2,000 years is currently undergoing new excavations. Researchers are focusing on a different part of Pompeii, an area about the size of a full city block that's never been picked over before. They are hoping to uncover skeletons and other proof of daily life in the ancient Roman city. You're likely familiar with Pompeii, but here's a quick recap just in case. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted unexpectedly and blanketed the Roman city in hot ash. Anyone caught in the eruption was killed immediately, and their bodies were preserved like stone statues. Researchers have been doing excavations here for decades, but now they have technology that can help to make even more impressive discoveries. According to the director of the Pompeii Archaeological Park, Gabriel Zuchtriegel, researchers are now using DNA analysis to see which skeletons are related to one another. The new neighborhood that's under investigation was an emerging economic powerhouse at the time of the eruption. They've already found buildings that had just gone up before the destruction, like a new thermal bath that was built on a street corner. For the first time, it looks like researchers are able to investigate a neighborhood that was in the middle of its development, something totally unique in Pompeii. The Hohokam petroglyphs. In Arizona's South Mountain Park, there are strange prehistoric petroglyphs carved onto dozens of rock faces. The petroglyphs were left behind by the Hohokam people, who dominated the Gila River and Salt Valley starting around the 1st century AD. They would thrive here for 1,450 years. But just like the petroglyphs they left behind, the Hohokam civilization is extremely mysterious. Even their name translates to "those who have gone." Scholars say they vanished without a trace, simply disappearing after ruling the area for nearly 15 centuries. Nobody knows the meaning of the unique symbols and pictures the Hohokam people left carved into the rocks. There are abstract images that could symbolize just about anything, depending on your own interpretation. The Pima Indians consider the petroglyphs to have spiritual significance and think the abstract images may be representations of primal elements. But no matter what anybody says, the truth is that the original purpose of the rock art is unknown, and quite frankly, there is nobody left to ask about it. Do you think the Hohokam people left the petroglyphs as a way to communicate with future civilizations? Let us know in the comments. Sunken Roman ship. Underwater archaeologists came across the remains of a Roman ship off the coast of Croatia that sank 2,000 years ago. The amazing discovery was made by scientists with the International Center for Underwater Archaeology. Scientists first identified the wreckage site in 2021, after they uncovered random pieces of wood and some coins minted during the rule of Emperor Constantine. The discovery of these few artifacts led to a full-scale survey. Researchers soon revealed over 20 feet of the ship's hull, all of which had been buried under about 6 feet of sand. What's even more exciting is the location where the shipwreck was found, near the underwater ruins of Barbier, an ancient trading hub that thrived and sank during the Roman era. Preliminary tests have shown the ship was built during either the 1st or 2nd century AD. It was likely a trading vessel, bringing goods into Roman lands. And although much of the ship has been damaged because of shipworms that ate the wood, it's still in surprisingly good shape. The team is hoping that by the end of 2023, they'll reveal more of the hull and learn more about the history of the ship. Thanks for watching! What was your favorite discovery? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!